Hello everyone, today I'm going to tell you the story of a young woman named LyTuDiep. After long, dragging months of hardship and loneliness, after countless nights torn apart by memories she wished she could forget, Diep finally saw a glimmer of light at the end of her dark road. She had learned to face and accept what had happened, slowly letting go of her old wounds to open the door to a new life. And at that door stood James, the man whose patience seemed unshakable, the man who had walked beside her through her darkest days. With him, Diep found herself becoming braver, not only to smile again but to dream of a life filled with warmth and abundance. That morning, the air was bathed in the gentle light of autumn. The two of them sat together on the porch, the steam from their jasmine tea mingling with the soft morning breeze. The first rays of sunlight spilled into the garden, turning it the color of golden honey as they filtered through the lightly swaying branches of the longan trees. James and Diep sipped their tea while talking about the future, the new home they had long dreamed of, the rose bushes and rows of vegetables they would plant, and, most importantly, the child growing day by day in Diep's womb. Whenever James spoke about their baby, his eyes would light up. Diep could only smile in quiet happiness, her hand gently caressing her belly. The whole morning passed in such warmth and peace that time itself seemed to pause. But work still had to go on. Reluctantly, James stood up, leaned down to kiss Diep lightly on the forehead, and headed out to take care of business. Diep stayed behind, settling into her usual daily rhythm. Her tasks for the day went smoothly, and her joy doubled at the thought of the surprise James had been secretly preparing, the blueprint of their new house. She had turned that drawing over and over, each line showing his care and meticulous attention. In the late afternoon, as the sunlight softened, Diep put on her conical hat and carried a bamboo basket out to harvest longans to sell. The orchard was in peak season, the branches heavy with fruit, the sweet fragrance drifting through the air. The snip of the pruning shears echoed rhythmically, mingling with the chirping of sparrows calling to one another. Beads of sweat began forming on her forehead, but the smile at the corner of her lips never faded. She knew she was tending to the very life she had once thought she would never have. Then, just as she bent down to cut a cluster of longans, a wave of dizziness suddenly swept over her. The world before her blurred, her breathing quickened. A wave of nausea rose in her chest, forcing her to stop and brace herself against the tree for balance. Just a little more, she told herself, swallowing the discomfort. Gritting her teeth, she finished the last basket of longans and walked slowly back to the house, each step feeling twice as long, her legs heavy as lead. As soon as she set the basket down, she collapsed into a chair, the dizziness still clinging to her. She took a sip of water, trying to breathe deeply, but her head kept spinning, as though she were adrift on a never-ending, unseen tide. Diep sat silently at the table, her hands trembling slightly as she held a glass of water. The surface rippled with each tremor in her fingers, the tiny waves mirroring the unsteady sway of her body. Her face had gone pale, cold sweat sliding down her temples and soaking into her already damp hair. The dizziness came in waves, blurring her vision as if a thin veil had been drawn over her eyes. The sudden ring of the phone shattered the heavy silence. It was James. "Are you doing okay?" His voice was light at first, carrying a touch of cheer as if expecting to hear good news from her. "I just finished work, was thinking of picking up some things for dinner." But within seconds, his tone changed completely, tense and urgent, as he caught the sound of Diep's labored breathing on the other end. "Diep, what's wrong? You don't sound well at all." Trying to steady her breath, Diep answered briefly. "I'm just a little tired, probably from staying out in the garden too long." "Don't worry." But James could hear the frailty in every word she spoke. He needed no further explanation. He dropped everything, tossed his office keys onto the desk, and rushed to his car. The wind howled against the windshield, but James barely noticed, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Images of Diep flashed through his mind, tangled with a suffocating fear. Could this be dangerous for the baby? Was her health already this fragile? When he opened the front door, the sight before him made his chest tighten painfully. Diep slumped against the back of the chair, eyes closed, her breathing labored, her face so pale it was almost frightening. James rushed to her, kneeling in front of her and gripping her thin shoulders. "Listen to me, we have to get to the hospital right now." Without waiting for her reply, James slipped a coat over her and scooped her into his arms. Her body felt light, too light, in his hold, and it only deepened his worry. On the way, his hand clasped hers tightly, as if trying to pour all his strength into her. She weakly turned her head toward him, lips moving but no sound coming out. James squeezed her hand even harder, his voice breaking. "You have to hold on. I can't lose you, or our baby." At the hospital, the harsh white lights glared overhead, and the scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, checking her vitals, monitoring the baby's heartbeat. James stayed right by her side, watching every number on the screen, his heart dropping whenever the readings wavered. After a while, the doctor returned, speaking in a low but firm voice. Her blood pressure dropped sharply due to working too long in the sun and lacking proper nutrition. "Fortunately, the baby's heartbeat is stable, but if this happens again, it could be dangerous for both mother and child." James exhaled deeply, though sweat still clung to his brow. He turned to her, gripping her hand, his voice hoarse. "I promised I'd protect you and our baby. From now on, no more heavy work. Leave the garden to me." Diep opened her eyes, still hazy, but she caught the deep concern and fierce tenderness in his expression. Her tears fell, not just from fear, but from the clarity of something she had never felt so strongly before. She was no longer alone, and never would be again. That night, lying in James's arms, Diep placed her warm hand over her belly, feeling the gentle kicks within. In her heart, a quiet vow echoed. "I'll keep fighting, for you. And for this man." After the incident at the hospital, Diep had to stay for observation for 3 days. During all 3 days, James was hardly ever out of the room. He sat in the chair by her bed, leaving only when the doctor or nurse asked him to step outside for her examinations. Even when the doctor advised him to go home and rest for a few hours, he only left reluctantly, and always returned earlier than promised. The nights in the hospital were filled with the steady beeping of the monitor in the stark white room. James often sat leaning against the edge of her bed, his hand firmly holding hers. Whenever she shifted or breathed a little heavier than usual, he would immediately lean over and ask, "Are you feeling okay?" before gently helping her settle back into place. In that time, Diep felt a clear change within herself. She no longer placed work, the garden, or daily chores above everything else. Instead, she learned to listen to her body, giving absolute priority to her own health and to the baby growing inside her. The doctor's words on the day of discharge kept replaying in her mind. One more episode like that, and both mother and baby could be in danger. James had changed completely as well. As soon as they returned home, he reorganized his work schedule, called on acquaintances to take care of the garden, help with the harvest, and handle the sale of the longans. The tasks Diep used to shoulder were now delegated to others. Most of his time was spent with her, taking light walks around the yard in the mornings, preparing nutritious meals at noon, and spending the evenings talking about their future plans. One afternoon, under the golden light of sunset, the two stood on an empty plot of land, where their new home was set to rise. A gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. James pulled a roll of paper from his pocket and unrolled it in front of her. It was the house plan he had revised many times, the baby's room in the brightest spot, a balcony facing the flower garden Diep loved, and a spacious kitchen where she could cook comfortably. Diep stared at the blueprint, her hand trembling slightly. The lines on the paper were no longer a distant dream, but solid proof of a future taking shape. She looked up at James, her voice catching. "I'll take care of myself, I'll live well, for you, for our child, and for this home." James smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "And I'll do everything to make sure you never have to go through a scare like that again." From that day on, Diep's life became slower, calmer. Each morning, she woke to the sound of birdsong, sipping hot tea on the porch. At dusk, she and James watched the sunset drape the empty plot in gold, a place that, in just a few months, would echo with a child's laughter. The memory of that life or death moment in the hospital remained vivid, but it was no longer a shadow over her. Instead, it became a reminder, this happiness was hard-won, and they would protect it together, every single day. One chilly early winter morning, the pale golden sunlight spread across the front yard like a soft, warm blanket. In the kitchen, Diep had just finished brewing a pot of hot ginger tea when she heard the sound of a car pulling up outside the gate. James stepped out quickly, and right behind him was the figure of an older woman, still quick on her feet, her eyes bright, and her smile warm and kind. It was James's mother. She wore a beige sweater and a light blue scarf around her neck. In her hands was a large basket filled with ripe, fragrant oranges, several dozen fresh eggs, bundles of organic greens, and even a bag of traditional medicinal herbs for a prenatal bath. The moment she saw Diep, her face lit up with a smile. "There's my future daughter-in-law. I came today to see how you and the baby are doing." Diep felt a little shy, but a wave of warmth filled her as she saw the affection in the woman's eyes. James quickly took the basket from his mother, while Diep invited her in and poured a cup of hot tea, placing it gently in front of her. The three sat around the wooden table. Sipping her tea, James's mother looked closely at Diep, her voice full of care. "How have you been eating lately? Craving anything special? I can make it and bring it over." Diep smiled softly. "I've been eating well, Mother. James takes such good care of me, I haven't lacked for anything." She nodded in approval, pride flickering in her eyes, but she still offered a gentle reminder. "Eating well is one thing, but you have to eat properly. Remember to split your meals into smaller portions, don't wait until you're too hungry. Avoid spicy foods, cut down on coffee, and drink plenty of warm water. These free-range eggs I brought, eat 3 or 4 a week for nourishment. Oh, and I brought some black beans and sesame seeds. James can make you a sweet soup with them, it's cooling and great for your blood." She then turned to James, her tone half playful, half serious. "I'm glad to see you're taking care of her, but it's not just about food. Make sure she rests plenty, no heavy work. And with the weather turning cold, she shouldn't be out in the garden early in the morning or late at night." James nodded firmly, as if accepting an important mission. Their conversation flowed into warm laughter. James's mother began telling stories about his mischievous childhood, how at 5 years old, he once secretly picked his grandfather's longans, ate them, and hid the seeds behind the chicken coop, only to be caught and scolded, yet still pouted in defiance. Diep laughed so hard she had to hold her belly, her hand gently stroking it as though sharing the joy with her baby. James could only sit quietly, caught between embarrassment and happiness as he watched the two women, one older, one younger, chatting like a true mother and daughter. When the sun was high, his mother opened her basket and took out a cream-white knitted sweater with a tiny matching hood, just the right size for a newborn. Her voice brimmed with love. "I knitted this for my grandchild. I don't know if it'll be a boy or a girl, but it'll suit either. The yarn is very soft, it won't itch the baby's skin." Diep hugged the little sweater to her chest, the gentle scent of new wool making her nose sting with emotion. She had never imagined she would one day have such a warm family, a kind mother-in-law, a devoted husband, and a home filled with laughter and love. That morning drifted by slowly, in the golden warmth of sunlight, with the gentle bubbling of the tea kettle, the sweet scent of oranges, and the sound of laughter filling the home. It was the moment Diep knew for certain that her little family was not only built on James's love, but also sheltered by wider, warmer arms that would always hold them close. That afternoon, the sunlight slanted across the hillside, bathing everything in a golden hue, as if the land were covered in a layer of sweet honey. James gently held Diep's hand as they stepped out of the car, his palm warm against the crisp autumn breeze. Before them lay a wide plot of land nestled against a gentle slope, opening out into a lush green meadow that stretched all the way to the edge of the forest. Tall, ancient trees stood in neat rows, their leaves whispering in the wind, and every so often, a golden leaf would twirl gracefully to the ground. In the distance, the half-built frame of their new home stood clearly against the afternoon light, prominent beneath a clear blue sky dotted with slow-drifting clouds. The rhythmic clink of hammers echoed alongside the soft hum of saws, mingling with the mild fragrance of freshly cut wood and the earthy scent of damp soil lingering from last night's rain. A few workers moved busily about, their cheerful chatter adding a lively pulse to the scene. James turned to her, his eyes bright with pride and anticipation. "This is where I want us to begin our next chapter." Diep stood still, letting the breeze carry in the fresh scent of young grass, her heart suddenly light. In her mind, she pictured mornings where sunlight would stream through the bedroom window, casting warm streaks across the white sheets, and evenings where the kitchen would hum with the sounds of cooking, laughter, and the voices of children. James pointed out each space. Here would be the baby's room, there the kitchen, and in that little corner of the porch, he'd place a swing chair for her to sit and read while listening to the wind in the trees every afternoon. His hand gently tightened around hers, his gaze steady and reassuring like a promise. And in that moment, Diep realized that the walls rising before them were not just the makings of a house, but the very shape of a home, a place of love, protection, and quiet seasons waiting patiently ahead.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Thì hôm nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người những video về những câu chuyện hay và hấp dẫn. Như mọi người cũng biết thì ở trên kênh mình sẽ không chỉ lên một nội dung mà sẽ lên nhiều nội dung. Ví dụ như là kênh Lý Tử Diệp của mình thì sẽ lên cả nội dung quản lý hoài ca. Ngoài ra thì còn có các câu chuyện khác khá là hay mà mình muốn truyền tải đến cho mọi người. Thì mọi người cũng có thể đăng ký kênh mình, sau đó là bật chuông thông báo lên để mỗi khi mà kênh mình ra video thì mọi người có thể là đón xem. Và thường thì kênh mình sẽ cố gắng lên 2 video một ngày để có thể đáp ứng nhu cầu xem của mọi người. Nhưng mà cũng do bận một số công việc nữa, với lại vấn đề về sức khỏe các thứ thì có thể là nhiều hôm thì mình chỉ có thể lên một video thôi. Nếu như mọi người yêu quý kênh của mình thì hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Và rất hy vọng có thể gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Bye bye.